It's Wednesday morning. That means it's time for Garland Nixon and Scott Ritter to have a conversation with you. Let's talk. Hi, Garland and Scott here. Let me start off by reminding everyone that Scott Ritter does great work. So go to scottritterextra.com. That's scottritterextra.com. You can find all of Scott's good works there. And as we all know, everybody here is pushed, persecuted by the powers that be. We all got to do what we got to do to try to make a living and feed our family. So go to scottritterextra.com and do everything that you can financially to support Scott, to help him to be able to do his work, to make his videos, to write his books, to travel and speak to us here and there where he gets the opportunity. scottritterextra.com. Also, you can see everything scrolling across the bottom there. If they toss me off YouTube, which could possibly happen, go to rockfin.com/Garland Nixon so you can find me there. Doesn't cost anything to join and be a member. If you can afford it, you can become a subscriber for $14.99 a month as a subscriber of Rockfin to help keep Rockfin going, help keep the channel strong for those who can afford it. If you can't, just become a member at no cost and share this on all your social media platforms. All right, Scott Ritter, and you see everything. Buy me a coffee and all that stuff is available if you can afford to help the channel. Okay, Scott, let's start here. Ukraine, when you talk about the word collapse, boy, we've been using that. You got assassinations, literal assassinations going on inside the Kiev regime. I'm reading more and more. They're sending people with no arms, women, anybody they can get to throw to the front. It looks like we are in the throes of the collapse as we speak, Scott Ritter.
No, I mean, we've been talking about this for some time now, not just the military collapse, which is ongoing as we speak. I mean, when you have General Zaluzhny, the commander of the Ukrainian armed forces, who, just so everybody remembers, last December gave an interview to The Economist where he said, I can beat these guys, meaning the Russians. I can beat them, but you got to give me an army. You got to give me tens of billions of dollars worth of equipment, hundreds of tanks, hundreds of fighting vehicles, hundreds of pieces of artillery, unlimited ammunition. And he got it. And they launched this counteroffensive, and it failed from day one. From June 4th, when the counteroffensive is widely anticipated or widely acknowledged to have started, until today, until Zaluzhny's announcement that it's over. We lost. We can't beat these guys. We're not going to win. That was it. That was everything we had, and we got nothing left, and we ain't getting anything more. It's over. Now, he's hoping for a stalemate. That's a little optimistic, Mr. Zaluzhny, or General Zaluzhny. I don't know how long he'll be general. But, it's a little because Russia doesn't believe it's a stalemate. Russia's launching attacks. Russia's going to go over on the general offensive. This is the beginning of collapse. The Ukrainian momentum has stopped. Ukrainians now are assuming a general defensive posture that's unsustainable because of the same military math that led to the counteroffensive to collapse to begin with. They don't have enough resources. Russia, meanwhile, has hundreds of thousands of men that it's able to deploy as it chooses to maintain the pressure. And I think we're going to see, basically just a general Russian advance until we get the ultimate military collapse. But the war is over right now. Just like I think people could say that at the end of the Kursk battle in 1943 in August, when the last German, Super Tiger stopped rolling, it was over because they didn't have any more. They just used them all. And the Russians were like, well, we got lots of troops left. We're going to keep coming at you. And it took a little bit longer. I mean, the war didn't end until May 1945. Now, I'm not suggesting that this war is going to last that long. But what I am saying is there's some fighting left. There's bloody fighting. The Ukrainians still have some bite in them, but they are a beaten dog. And it's over. There's no doubting the outcome here. But as we talked about with collapse, there's military collapse, and then there's political collapse. And the military collapse we talked that would precipitate the political collapse. That when it became clear that Ukraine could not prevail on the battlefield, politically clear. I'm not talking about militarily clear. I'm talking about when even the politicians are going, we can't win. And you see that. I mean, Arestovich used to be the mouthpiece of the regime. He's out there right now saying, we can't win. We never could win. I was lying back then. I want to talk about how we're going to, fix this thing here. You got, other people, weighing in the same way. It's political. Zelensky, the only thing that gave him viability as a leader was the fact that he had been elevated to Winston Churchill-like status by his international supporters. And then they used that perception of him being Winston Churchill as, the center of gravity around which you could justify the expenditure of money and the provision of equipment. Give it to Zelensky. Zelensky will save Ukraine. Nobody's believing that anymore except Zelensky. He gave an interview to Time magazine where he continues to say that he's the savior, that he's the Messiah-like figure, that he alone can solve this problem, but he can't. And so now we see a falling out between Zelensky and General Zaluzhny. There was talk the other day that the Minister of Defense, newly appointed Minister of Defense, might be recommending that Zaluzhny submits his resignation. Will the army allow this to happen? I mean, we're at the point now where there's a split, and I've been saying this all along that I think the solution to the Zelensky problem will probably come from the 75-cent version. That is the cost of one 9mm bullet placed right about there in the back of the head. And we're getting closer and closer to that point. We're getting to the point where at some point in time, a group of generals will go up, and it won't be pretty. I mean, think Nicholas Ceausescu, think what happened to him in Romania. They're going to hold a kangaroo court, say, we find you guilty of every crime in the world, shoot him, bam, gone. He might not even get a trial because this is Ukraine. He just may step out of a car and somebody just comes up and pop 3 in his face, and that's the end of Zelensky. The smartest move he can make right now is get the hell out of Ukraine, is to resign and run, or run and resign. That's what I would recommend. Run, then resign. Because if you resign before you run, they're on to you. They're going to kill you. There's no love lost. People hate this, man. And it's going to become even more hatred as the consequences of this conflict become known. Right now, the Ukrainian government has been trying to hide it and put smoke screens out. But it's just too obvious. You can't even hide the dead anymore. Nobody's pretending anymore. Nobody is pretending that more than 400,000 Ukrainians have died. No one's saying that's an exaggeration. I mean, there's some NATO types, but nobody in Ukraine is. Why? Because you can't hide the cemeteries. You literally can't hide the cemeteries. They are everywhere. And everybody acknowledges that that's a low ball, because once you start adding in the uncounted dead, of which there are 60 to 80,000, you're topping out over 500,000. Who said Ukraine was going to lose 500,000 people by this time? Oh, yeah, me. Back when everybody was like, no, Scott, you're high. Well, I might have been high. I wasn't. I don't do that. But, high on arrogance, I guess. Scott, you're a very arrogant person. I don't think so, but the point is, this was predictable. None of this should take anybody by surprise. Basic military math made this the only outcome there could be. And when you have a military collapse of this scale, there will be political consequences. Right now, Zelensky's making phone calls and nobody's answering around the world. Nobody wants to receive this guy. Nobody. They're giving lip service about, we're going to give you this, we're going to give you that, we're giving this. But now that even when Congress is talking about money now, there's no more talk about funding the war. It's funding reconstruction. Meaning, hey, it's time to talk about the war's over. We're going to rebuild you. It's over for them. We are looking at the collapse. Tragically, this isn't going to end well for Zelensky, I don't believe. I mean, I don't want to predict anything. I'm not promoting anything. I would prefer that even though I think he's committed horrific crimes, that he's not alone, and that he was, entrapped by the West. So maybe he can claim entrapment, whatever. Just get the hell out of Ukraine. Go live in your Miami mansion. Take some of your money. Hire some security, because you're going to need it. You're a hunted man for the rest of your life. And then just try your best to make good with your wife and your kids while you still have them, because nobody's going to forgive you for what you've done, Zelensky. Nobody will forgive you for what you've done. You have overseen the destruction of a nation, Ukraine, that didn't need to be destroyed. It's destroyed because of your arrogance, because of your pride, because of your ignorance, because of your weakness, your personal individual weakness, not able to stand up to the world to do the right thing by the people who elected you to office as a president of peace. You were supposed to crawl on your knees to Vladimir Putin and prevent the very war that you promoted as soon as you got elected. History will judge you harshly. Zaluzhny, we have yet to see. I don't hold him in high esteem. This is a man who smiles when he takes his photograph with the portrait of Stepan Bandera in the background. So he deserves to be put up against the wall and given whatever you do to people who are put up against the wall, he and others. But right now, he has at least acknowledged defeat. He at least is creating putting down that foundational stone upon which a wall of logic can be built to bring an end to this conflict. And if Zaluzhny can bring an end to this conflict, if Zaluzhny can save, because let me put it this way, Garland, there might be 500,000 dead Ukrainians. Now, if they continue to fight and drag this thing out, they're going to lose another 200, 300,000 guys. Okay, that's just the reality. So Zaluzhny can save those lives. You can't save the lives that have been lost. You can't do that. But you can save those lives. And, then maybe history will give him a pardon for his past sins. We'll see. I think the burden of his sins are weighing on Zaluzhny, and you can see it in his face. There's no confidence here, etc. Now, about his deputy, I don't know what happened there, Garn. That's the strangest thing in the world. I mean, who mails somebody a bag of 5 grenades? This wasn't a bomb. This wasn't like he opened up a box and went boom. It was a grenade, and he pulled the pin, and it went boom. He's a general. You'd think he'd know what a grenade looks like. His son apparently was holding his hands and playing with the pin. He said, "No, let me show you how that's done, boy." Boom. Was he drunk? Who knows? Was this supposed to happen? Was this a tragic accident? We don't know. But when you have a second in command that's that distracted, that's a sign of collapse. Okay, that's a sign of collapse. This man shouldn't be at home receiving bags of grenades. This man should be in the office planning, the breakout phase of the counteroffensive, or the withdrawal phase where they're going to do something. He should be. There is a nation at war. A nation at war. So why is the second in command at home drunk, receiving a bag full of grenades? Not a good thing.
I have a feeling he ain't gonna be the last guy who gets a bag of grenades for a Halloween party. But at any rate, let me ask you this, because we usually don't talk politics, but I want to hear politics from you today, Scott. At the end of this thing, people are going to look at the withdrawal, the debacle that was the withdrawal from Afghanistan, right? I've said for years they should get out. And they said, oh, we can't because this thing will be an incubator for terrorism. We can't possibly leave. And on a given Tuesday, they woke up and said, okay, we're out of here. And that was a disaster when they left. You've got this thing, which some months from now, maybe by the summer, there'll be documentaries being made as the war is over, they've lost, and there'll be people, and Russia will be in charge. And they will be interviewing people. So tell me, what did Anthony Blinken say when he came? Oh, how did Jake Sullivan plan this and plan that? Oh, let's ride by these cemeteries and just look at all the dead. There will be documentaries. There will be all kind of information made, and people will be aghast at what they hear and find. We're looking at Joe Biden now, and as I'm no Trump fan by any stretch of the imagination. I'm an independent. I don't like either of these parties, but Trump's beating the crap out of Joe Biden, and the lead is getting wider. And I talked to people in the Black community who literally were like, you got to vote for Biden to stop Trump, who are now saying to me, if you forced me, I'd have to vote for Trump. Biden is done. And this hasn't hit yet. And Israel, young voters of all races are like, oh, we despise Joe Biden. They're holding up pictures of him with fangs that say Genocide Joe, 300,000-400,000 people wandering around the Capitol, screaming, shaking their fists in the air at how much they hate Joe. It appears that Barack Obama was right when he said, never underestimate Joe Biden's ability to F things up. He got that one right. The political situation, Joe Biden, the Democrats in the United States. Scott Ritter.
Well, look, America's been politically dysfunctional for some time now. One can make the argument that the ultimate moment of, I mean, we've been in a political climate. Let's just be honest about this, okay? George W. Bush was a legacy president, meaning that he had no qualifications to be president. And when the political party reaches down and says we're going to pick somebody totally unqualified and then build a regime around him led by Dick Cheney, because that's what happened. That was the plan. That's dysfunction, because that doesn't mean we have a leader. It means that we have a system, an establishment, and that's problematic. And so we have the establishment. We have the neoconservative establishment going up against the liberal progressive establishment, if that's what you call it, two establishments. And what we saw after that, again, Barack Obama, what were his qualifications to be president? About the same as his qualifications to receive the Nobel Peace Prize, which were none. A good-looking black guy. And to be honest, if I'm African-American, and I'm not, obviously, I would be insulted by having somebody call Barack Obama black, because his mother was white, his father was Kenyan, so he's not African-American the traditional way. His ancestors didn't come over on that boat, if you know what I mean. I mean, if you want an identifying feature of an African-American, it is the legacy of slavery. I mean, that's what unites them. That's what makes this whole issue of civil rights so it resonates so much. You don't want to be talking about civil rights when you're talking about a white lady and a Kenyan. That's a different history. That's a different background. It's not the same thing. Plus, he grew up in Hawaii. He went to Punahou, an elite high school. You know, there's African-American children in Baltimore, in Washington, D.C., that would love to go to a Punahou, and then he went to Harvard, and, the man had a silver spoon in his mouth from day one. He didn't do anything to qualify for anything like the Senate or anything else, except he was an eloquent speaker, a very good speaker. Not that good, but he captivated audience. But they threw their weight behind him. He became president. Why? Establishment picked him. And then the establishment picked Hillary Rodham Clinton. But the way they picked her was to run roughshod over Bernie Sanders, who was doing this genuine grassroots movement kind of thing. But they squished that, threw her in there, and that allowed this rogue character named Donald Trump, who came out of nowhere and crushed the Republican establishment. If you remember the Republican debates of 2015, 2016, if you were a Republican, a dyed-in-the-wool Republican, you were humiliated by this, because, Donald Trump ain't a Republican. He's a Democrat who crossed over. He's a businessman. He's a TV guy. He's an opportunist, whatever you want to call him. He's not your traditional Republican. And he wiped the floor with the traditional Republicans in the debates, just destroyed them, humiliated them, showed the American public that the Republican Party stands for nothing, because it's composed of literally nothing. Nobodies. And then this began, this rogue character has a civil war in the Republican Party. He's promoted a political civil war with the Democrats, and we've been at civil war ever since then. We are a fundamentally dysfunctional nation when it comes to politics. And the reason why I bring this up is it's very difficult, Garland, to have a rational discussion about Joe Biden, because the man is unqualified to be anything. Every time he ran for president before he got more votes than anybody else in the history of America, I'm not going to sit here and say, I know this was a stolen election. I'm just going to say that if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, and it's a duck, man.
And those voting machines are certainly, as I must say to YouTube, that the voting machines are very good and trustworthy, and they certainly work well. And we can trust that no one would ever hack them.
And nobody would ever stuff a ballot box. No.
Exactly.
No, because those poll workers are honest, God-fearing people that believe in America, and they'd never get caught stuffing a ballot box like they just did in that one election.
Right.
That was just it's not that. I'm not accusing. Look, my whole thing is I'm not saying this was a stolen election from that standpoint. I'm saying the same thing that Time Magazine wrote. In fact, I'll pat myself on the back in December, before the Time Magazine article came out, December of 2020. I wrote an article and submitted it for publication in a couple of places, and it was rejected. And what I said is that it's not a stolen election per se, but that it's an extra constitutional election, that the Democrats took advantage of the COVID situation to game the system, to promote. That doesn't happen, Garland. That doesn't happen, but it did. But they gamed the system. They this whole mail-in ballot thing and how they went around the courts to make it happen and all this stuff. It's not that mail-in ballots are illegal. What it is, though, is a process that was introduced at the last minute that disrupted the entire framework of how you think an election is going to be run. The way we do elections in America are so screwed up. They're very complicated. Each state does their own thing, etc. So if you're going to run a nationwide election, you have a strategy based upon the knowns, how things work in each state. And the Democrats at the last second went in and changed all that and threw the Republicans off. I'm not saying that they stole it by stuffing ballots, because we know that ballot stuffing can't happen. But what I'm saying is what the Time Magazine article said, that they changed the system using extra constitutional means. That means it doesn't mean that they went against the Constitution. They did things that the Constitution didn't foresee. And
let me add something real quick. And I would advise people to watch videos with a guy named Robert Epstein. One of the things they found, literally, what Google was doing was this. If, let's say, Garland and Scott was running, and they liked Garland, who would, I guess, be Joe Biden, and they didn't like Scott, who would be anybody else. But what Google literally did, Garland and Scott, we send out our emails that says, don't forget to come vote tomorrow. This is where you vote, as you do. Scott's would go to the spam folder. They literally sent the emails from people they didn't like to the spam folder, so that the Google literally, they've got calculations now, literally millions of votes they accounted for all over the place. How obvious is it to do that? So I don't want to get hung up too long on that, but bottom line, I don't either. You know what the point is? I think it's, Scott, the point is this. People do not trust the traditional institutions, the media, the voting, the government, the UN. All of the traditional institutions are fully and wholly discredited. Let's move on from that to what's happening in Gaza. They're talking about putting troops in rubble. I read one day, yes, they've divided Gaza and they're in there and they're moving into Gaza. The troops are in Gaza and they're fighting. And I read the next day, well, they're not really in Gaza fighting, but and I'm like, anyway, the concept of going into Gaza fighting in rubble. Your thoughts on the military aspect of the entire Israeli, what is shaping up to be? I thought Ukraine was going to be the mother of all debacles. I guess this will be the father of all debacles. Where Biden has an entire family of all debacles. Scott Ritter.
Well, Israel's doing that which we asked them not to do, which is a full-scale invasion of Gaza. They just have dressed it up. The initial incursions that they went into, if you take a look at the map right now, you see a very impressive drive across the middle of Gaza, splitting it in half into a north and a south. And then you see the Israelis making incursions from the north and then coming down the coastline. Now, if you take that blue, which they've done it in blue, and you remove it, you'll see that this is primarily open spaces. So what Israel's done is avoid all the urban spaces. They've come in and they've gone through the open spaces, and they've done that to surround the place that they bombed the living hell out of. Now they need to go into those urban spaces and clear them out. And this is going to be a completely different game. They sent in Sayat Matkal, the General Reconnaissance Unit, who penetrated into the center of Gaza for a special reconnaissance mission. And then they say, we're in the center of Gaza, we're operating. No, that's just like saying that, we sent, commandos to Desert One during the failed hostage rescue mission and say, we're occupying the central Iran. Really? You're occupying central Iran with a handful of guys on an airplane that have to get the hell out of there when one hits the other. You can't say you're occupying or you have control. You took highly trained troops, they infiltrated in, they did a thing, and they came out. That's it. They haven't sent in, a battalion. It's not a fortified position in controlling the space. In fact, they don't control too much space. What you're finding is, even in the open spaces, you see what the bulldozers do now. They're going in through all the sand dunes and everything, and they're leveling them, because that's where the tunnels are that Hamas has been popping out. It's not like Hamas never thought that they would do that, though. I can guarantee that Hamas has a plan B, a plan C, a plan D, a plan E, all the way down. Hamas has thought this thing through. You can't assume that they haven't, based upon the level of planning that went into their October 7th attack on Israel. That was meticulously planned. You have to believe that they've carried out that same level of planning, because they lured Israel in. They're getting Israel to do exactly what they wanted Israel to do, which is to come into Gaza and die a death of 1,000 cuts. I was just reading the other day that that's actually a form of torture that's used on people. You literally kill them with 1,000 cuts, and it's very painful, and it takes a long time, and that's what Israel's gotten itself into here. It's always risky, Garland, to be sitting here thousands of miles removed from any problem, and making pronouncements of this nature based upon an incomplete set of data. I'm not sitting in the Israeli command post. I'm not privy to their plans. It's possible they actually know what they're doing. It's possible that Hamas has overhyped their capabilities, and that, as Seymour Hersh has written in his article, that they're down there gasping from a lack of oxygen in a darkened cave because they've run out of power. The air is bad, the food's rancid, and it's all over. I mean, that's what somebody's telling Seymour Hersh, a Pulitzer Prize winning author who wrote an article. I happen to believe that person's just dead wrong, that that's pure speculation on their part, that Hamas is far more prepared for this than we can possibly imagine. But we don't know. That's the whole point. We don't know what's going on. But what we do know is this, that Israel, when they stress tested their defense force capacity last year in Chariots of Fire, this year in Firm Hand, a full scope and scale stress test of what happens if everybody comes at us at once, that Israel didn't plan for this. Israel planned for the main fight being with Hezbollah up north. And that's where the bulk of the Israeli army would go, up north. They have a plan for that. Israel planned for fighting in the Golan Heights. Israel planned for a strategic war with Iran. What Israel planned for the West Bank and for Gaza was civil unrest and terrorist attacks. Israel did not plan for what happened on October 7th. They didn't plan for Hamas to come over the wall and tactically defeat the Israeli army in a stand-up fight, because they did. I think people need to understand that there were 2 battalions of the Golani Brigade that were deployed on combat duty on the Gazan border, and they got beat by Hamas in a stand-up fight. And the Golani is one of the best brigades that Israel has, the 13th Battalion, the 51st Battalion. They got beat. They got overrun. They got pushed back. It's a military fight, guys. It's a military fight. And the 300,000 troops that they've mobilized, they don't have a contingency plan for that. There's nowhere in the Israeli file cabinet is there a contingency plan for what to do when Hamas comes over the wall, bitch slaps us around, pushes us out, take hostages, and pull back. They don't have a contingency plan for that because they never imagined it. They never imagined it. So everything they're doing right now is a hip shoot. It's a hip shoot operation. So when they're going into Gaza, it's not like they thought this thing through. They're going into Gaza right now every day going, what are we going to do tomorrow? Well, what's the plan today? How are we going to do this? Okay, we've occupied this. What's our next step? And it leads to a lot of indecision. It leads to a lot of mistakes. And you're already getting Israeli officers coming out from within Gaza saying, this is the biggest goat rope we've ever seen in our life. And it's costing us lives. People are making errors. We don't know what we're doing. We're just going from here to here to here. We're moving around. I mean, it looks good when the Israelis publish their videos that show the tanks going down the road and firing a round off into a building. And you're like, hey, it blew something up. And you see the infantry walking around looking like infantry, and you're like, wow, the Israelis are moving. But you do know that you can do the same thing and accomplish absolutely nothing. because you're simply moving troops from point A to point B with no real tactical purpose. Why are they advancing? What is the purpose of the advance? Is there an enemy objective they're trying to take, or is it merely a presence that they're establishing a presence? And establishing a presence isn't really a sound tactical procedure, because a presence of what? You're above the ground, establishing presence on an anthill. And they come up out of the ground at night, and they're inflicting casualties on the Israelis every night. 5 vehicles, 10 vehicles, 5 dead Israelis, 12 dead Israelis. We're 30 days into this thing, and you're going to just watch as this thing continues. The casualties are going to just continue to rise and rise and rise. And it's only going to get worse as they get into the rubble. Again, I just ask the historians out there, look what happened when the Germans brought in their special pioneer sapper units in October of 1942 to win the final battle of the Barakati factory. As a battle that had to be fought because Germany bombed the factory and the Soviets were dug into the factory. They sent their elite combat engineer units in there, slaughtered, wiped out, couldn't do it. What happened to the Americans, the Poles, the British, the Indians, New Zealanders at Monte Cassino when we blew up this ancient religious place, dropped it down, made a rubble of it in the village, and the 6th Airborne Division of the Germans went underground. We kept trying to take it. We never really took it. We outflanked them and they withdrew. So then we occupied it. But as long as they defended that space, we couldn't take it. And this is just above ground. Talk to the Marines at Suribachi, talk to the Marines at Iwo Jima as they advanced on this tiny little island that had 14 kilometers of tunnels underground. And now the Japanese kept popping up and shooting them, popping up behind them. They'd advance, the Japanese come up behind them. I mean, it drove the Marines crazy. We lost a lot of Marines because of that. And that was with a desert island on top. Now you combine a Stalingrad-like collapsed urban environment with an Iwo Jima-like tunnel system underneath, and it is a nightmare. And if you haven't planned for this, you don't have a plan. And that's the problem with the Israelis right now. They don't have a plan. They don't have a political plan. They made these harsh statements. First of all, we have to understand this, Garland. Benjamin Netanyahu is saying things that he's not going to be around to see implemented. He's a failed politician. He's a man who oversaw the greatest defeat of Israel in Israeli history. He's a disgraced politician. Thousands of Israelis are protesting outside of his residence right now, demanding his immediate resignation. It's only going to get bigger. This is on top of the hundreds of thousands of Israelis that were demanding his resignation before October 7th because of his rewriting of Israeli basic law to disenfranchise the judiciary so he couldn't be held accountable for corruption charges. This is a corrupt individual who is a failed politician overseeing a panicked administration, desperately trying to make themselves relevant by speaking the language of war when the fact is they're not going to be there when it's time to negotiate the peace. So I would take everything that Benjamin Netanyahu says and flush it down the toilet of life, because somebody else who isn't named Netanyahu is going to be around when this thing comes to an end. Because he's done. He's finished. So are the generals. You see the Minister of Defense Gallant out there every day talking tough. How tough were you on October 7th, Gallant? You failure. You loser. You were part of that team that was talking. When they find out, when the Israelis finally wake up to what happened, that on the night of October 6th, October 7th, Gallant, the head of intelligence, Mossad, military intelligence, all got together and they were reading the intelligence reports sent by these young ladies, these observers on the wall, these other people right on the front line saying, hey guys, they're coming over tonight. They're coming over tonight. We need you to sound the alarm. We need you to call up the reserves. We need you to get ready because they're coming tonight. And they all looked at that and went, we'll sleep on this. Put it away, woke up in the morning. They came over. When this comes out, that they didn't order a stand to, they didn't bring everybody up on high alert, they didn't sound the alarms in the kibbutz so that the security forces could get out of bed, arm themselves, and assume their defensive posture. They didn't bring up the reinforcements. They didn't get the helicopters in the air. They didn't do any of that. When that comes out, how much political viability do you think these people have? None. Zero.
Scott, something I want to ask you about. I did a video on it yesterday, but I think two things happened. So this particular incident showed that Israel, from the perspective of intelligence and of military effectiveness, was ill prepared for actual combat. That it seemed to me it was a nice show. but they were not prepared for actual military conflict. Now, I say the same thing about Ukraine. That the U.S. was exposed to me, and let me say this: what we see is this: the U.S. is sending 2,000 Marines here, 500 there. That ain't nothing, you know that. Poland, remember this: we're sending the 101st Airborne or 82nd Airborne, and again a few thousand guys with lightly armored, blah blah. These are symbolic movements of troops, right? This is not saying we're going to send a fighting force. Here's what we're seeing: the U.S. can send in some ships and project power that way. They can, make some threats. They can drop a few symbolic soldiers. In Ukraine, people kept saying, the U.S., they want to get in. They're looking for an excuse to put boots on the ground. And Scott, every week you'd say, they ain't got boots to put on the ground. They can put boots on the ground, but there ain't going to be no soldiers in those boots. If the boots can fight, they got a great chance, but they got to have soldiers in them. What is being exposed, I think, Scott, is the U.S., it's all a fraud. Before the U.S. had military, they could put tanks and stuff on the ground and they could go fight. But now the U.S. can't go anywhere. We can't do a real war. What I mean is this: we can attack somebody, we can fire some missiles at them, we can fly some planes over them and drop some bombs. And after the first couple weeks, and the bombs have been exchanged and missiles have been exchanged, and now it's a ground fight. I told you, my brother, who was a special forces, always says, in the end, it comes down to a man with a rifle. You got to put soldiers with rifles, and you got to take ground, and you got to hold ground. The U.S. now, all we can do is fly over and bomb people. We can't go to war because we can't do a ground war. Forget it. Your thoughts, Scott?
Well, no, that's the sad fact. I mean, and here's the disturbing thing, Garland. We spend $800 billion a year on defense, and that's not even the whole truth. It's closer to $1 trillion when you get into secret budgets and you get into, the way they play financial games with all this stuff. So we spend a lot of money on the military, but where's it go? The one place it doesn't go is enhancing our conventional military power. We spend a lot of money on developing weapon systems, a lot of money on healthcare. My parents are retired military, so please keep funding healthcare for them. They earned it. They put in their time. But it's expensive. That's just the reality of it. What we don't spend money on anymore is conventional warfighting capability. That is to get the not armored brigades. We have to stop talking about brigade. The brigade became sort of the force in the post-Cold War environment where we said we're never going to fight a large-scale ground war again. So we're going to focus on the brigade combat team. That's going to become the focal point of our effort. We send in a brigade combat team. We can enhance it, and that's going to be sufficient to do what we need it to do. Ukraine just put 12 brigades into the meat grinder for this counteroffensive, and they're all dead, ladies and gentlemen. They're gone. They're finished. 12. We got 31 brigades, I think, in the U.S. Army. 31 active duty brigades. I think there's 11 armored brigades. That might be a high number. I don't know. I have to go back and look at it. But the point is, we don't have that many. And here's the beauty of it, ladies and gentlemen. In order to maintain strength, the U.S. Army needed to recruit 60,000 people last year. That's just to maintain the strength that they have. They're 15,000 short. So that means that the strength that we have right now is 15,000 lower than where it needs to be at full strength. So we have units right now that have to be mothballed or operating at diminished capacity. In order to build the military that Garland is talking about, a truly capable military where we can project this power, we're going to need another 150 to 250,000 troops. If we can't recruit 60,000 to maintain, how are we going to turn around and recruit 250,000 more to build? Nobody's joining the military anymore. I mean, and the people that do join, most of them, I hate to say it, but they're, this is one of the reasons why people are running away from the military, because you got to say the U.S. is spending money on, the healthcare. There's healthcare right there. No comment. I just thought people need to see that that the U.S. is spending lots of money on the military. Well, we're not spending, that's a political decision that I'll leave it up to the politicians, but I'll say this, that there does not enhance combat capacity. And if you're in the military business, you should be in the war fighting business, because that's why the military exists. The military doesn't exist to provide a mirror image of American society. The military doesn't need to be woke. It doesn't need to be, you have to adhere to constitutional standards, meaning that, you treat people with respect, with equality, et cetera. But there are places where they're not equal. With all due respect to the women in the military, yes, there are a handful of you that can go through Ranger School. Maybe. We don't know the full story of that yet. Did they let you go? Did you earn it? I don't know. I wasn't there. Let's just assume you earned it. All right. But the fact that 6 of you graduate or 8 of you graduate or whatever the number is, that does not a combat capacity make for females in America. The bottom line is the average female can't do what the average male infantryman can do and must do to prevail in combat. But when we integrated our forces, the Marine Corps took the lead on this. The Marine Corps challenged the Department of Defense, Department of Navy, when they said you have to integrate combat units. They said, no, if we do this, we ran a test. And if we do this, 2 things are going to happen. Our lethality is going to drop, meaning that this battalion that we've created, this Marine Infantry Battalion, when we deploy it, it's the most lethal fighting force the world has ever seen of that size. You are diminishing the lethality of that. So all the effort we put into creating this, you just made it instantly weaker, automatically. And not just are we going to not be able to kill them more, we become less efficient, which means our casualty rate will also increase. So we're killing less of them. They're killing more of us. We just neutered the Marine Infantry Battalion, neutered it right off the bat, just a starting block before the war even started. Military math, Garland. Military math is what I specialize in. And we just created an algorithm of defeat of the Marine Infantry Battalion in combat. Fortunately, we don't have a lot of women Marines in the infantry, so we haven't totally destroyed it. But, the Army is integrated that way. You bring in transgendered, look, to each his own or her own, or their own, or whatever pronoun they want to use. I don't care. I respect every individual's right to be an individual. Practice what you want to practice, as long as you're not hurting other people, as long as you're not trying to talk, underage kids into changing their sex. Once you reach the age of 18, dude, if you want to be called she, if you want to do this, if you want to do that, do it. This is America. Do it. You're not going to do it on the taxpayer dime, though, and you're not going to join the military to do that, because the military's business isn't to further your transgendered identity issues. The military's business is to close with and destroy the enemy through firepower and maneuver. End of story. And if you're not spending money on that, then why are we spending money? And we haven't been spending money on that. So we have a military right now, as you pointed out, that's incapable of winning a single war. There's not a war out there we can win right now against a major opponent without resorting to nuclear arms. We cannot beat Iran. I know people don't want to hear that right now. Scott, you're un-American. You're anti-American. You're a traitor. You come up with it, pal. I've done the op plan to go up against Iran. I know what it takes to go up against Iran. And Iran's a lot better today than they were when I helped write the op plan. We couldn't execute that op plan today because we don't have the force structure to do it. Forcible entry. Forcible entry. That op plan was predicated on the Marine Corps doing forcible entry into Chabahar and Bandar Abbas. I'm not giving away top secrets here, ladies and gentlemen. Forcible entry. But that was at a time when the Iranians didn't have the military they have today. Now the Iranians have area denial weapons. So as we come in to do our World War II style legacy operation, launch the landing craft, and off they come, and the boys are in the ships, coming in, bobbing and getting seasick, coming in there. It's Saving Private Ryan. They're hitting the beach. They're running out. LCAC's running in. Helicopters running in. They ain't never going to get to that point, because about 400 kilometers that direction, the ship got hit with a missile and it got sunk with all the Marines on board. That's what happened. It's not Scott Ritter making this up. General Berger, when he became the commandant on the Marine Corps, the former, when he came in, he said, I'm changing the legacy system because this World War II approach to amphibious operations doesn't work anymore. He transformed, I think it's either 1st Marine Division or 3rd Marine, the Pacific Marine Force. He's transformed them from traditional things. He's restructured them so they can fight and prevail in a South China Sea environment against China. So we come in with smaller forces, more mobile forces. So if they sink a ship, we lose 75 Marines, not 2,000 Marines. And he's changing. We can't fight. Where do you think we're going to offload all the troops we need? Let's say we have them. It's going to take 900,000 troops to beat Iran, ladies and gentlemen. 900,000 troops. We don't have them, but let's say we did have them. Where are we offloading them? What port? Because, I was involved in the planning of the Gulf War. I'm familiar with every aspect of the tip fiddle and the flow of forces. Every port we landed in there was a permissive landing environment, meaning that we came in with standard port operations, bring the ship in, offload it, waiting area here, move it over here. There was no incoming fire, no ships on fire. I planned a seizure operation of Alfal Peninsula, where we came up with a modern-day Mulberry Harbor. If you know the story about Normandy and how we sunk ships to create a harbor protected area, storm came in, it didn't work. But I came up with a plan where we were going to do sort of the equivalent of a causeway, roll-on, roll-off ships. The first one beaches, the second one comes in, hooks up with it, and basically you build a long highway out into the ocean using roll-on, roll-offs. Each ship is combat loaded, meaning the troops are in there going off the ship as they would be in combat formation, and you flow a division's worth of Marines in that way, and you have multiple lanes so that if one gets taken out, you can continue to flow. But we could do that only because we didn't have to worry about the Iranian. If we tried to do that mobile causeway operation against the Iranians, it would make it so they sink all the ships before they got there. This is the fact. Airports, we're going to just land in an airport? No, they're going to have air defense shooting us down. They're going to be pocketing how do we project this power in, and then how do we sustain it? Wars are won by logistics. We used to have pre-positioned capabilities all over the world. We pay a lot of money for them. We don't have those anymore, not of the scope and scale that we need. Right now in Kuwait, we maintain a brigade's worth. In Poland, we have 2 brigades worth. Brigades. Why are we talking brigades anymore? We need to be talking divisions. We need to be talking corps if you want to fight serious wars. To fight the Russians, who just, again, military math, Garland, they expanded the military from 900,000 to 1.5 million. That's 600,000. I just want to remind everybody out there, we were 15,000 short in our recruiting goal to get 60,000 to maintain our force level. Russia just went from 900,000 to 1.5 million, 600,000. But this doesn't include the special military operation, which has 300,000 reservists and 300,000 volunteers coming in. Russia absorbed 1.2 million people into their armed forces, or in the process of absorbing them. 1.2 million. And this means that they're putting uniforms on them, they're training them, they're arming them, they're equipping them, they're building force structure with modern equipment, with the logistical sustainability, all that ammunition you need to go to war, not just your basic combat load, but it's there to last you for months, is being stockpiled while they're engaged in a major shooting conflict with NATO in Ukraine, and they're winning. And you want to go to war against them. Now, I haven't even gotten into the Chinese yet and what the Chinese can do. Let me just leave it at this. That, what was that song? MC Hammer, Can't Touch This. That's the song the Chinese are running around doing right now. Can't touch this. We can sit here and talk all we want to do about Taiwan. The Chinese are just going, can't touch this. Because we can't. We got nothing to touch the Chinese except nuclear weapons. And the moment you have to default to nuclear weapons, you're saying that basically you got nothing. Ladies and gentlemen, we got nothing.
Wow. Well, the bottom line is this, as Carl Sagan put it, the nuclear weapons are like 2 adversaries standing waist deep in gas, one of them in gasoline. One of them has 3 matches, the other has 5. So to use nuclear weapons is not to win a war. It's to immediately lose a war. As soon as you fire it, they're going to start flying and you've lost. It's just to say, well, you know what? It's Hitler in the bunker. Well, everything's gone. I guess I'll shoot myself and my girlfriend here and we'll just die. That's all nuclear weapons is. And that's the only thing we got left is suicide. It looks like, it looks to me. And it appears to me that I put it like this, God. I don't consider Israel a country. I consider it, Alexander Haig said, it's our unsinkable aircraft carrier. Joe Biden said, if Israel did not exist, we'd have to create it to address our interests in the region. It's not that Garland doesn't consider it a country. It's that the leaders of our country consider Israel a United States military outpost in an oil-rich region. And that outpost, and this is what I think the big deal is. one of the things you keep hearing is deterrent. Israel no longer has its ability to deter the people in the region from, doing whatever they want to, pushing back against the U.S. It seems to me it's obvious that not only has the U.S. been exposed in Ukraine, the U.S. has also been exposed in Israel. And now the Arab nations aren't looking at Israel in the U.S. anymore saying, hey, we can't defeat them. They're just looking at them saying, are these lunatics crazy enough to nuke themselves and everybody else? But because that's gone, you're not going to get if I say I can beat everybody on the playground and some little kid comes up and kicks me in the teeth, no matter what I do, the other kids on the playground ain't going to be scared of me anymore. They're trying to get something back that I think they can never get. Scott, your thoughts?
No, you're 100% correct. The mythology of Israeli invincibility has been exposed as the fraud that it is. It's not just the performance of the IDF; it's the performance of the Israeli intelligence service. It's supposed to be all-knowing, all-wise, all-seeing. Apparently, they were easily spoofed. And it's also, Israel had become this untouchable from a global geopolitical standpoint. During Donald Trump's time, you didn't dare criticize Israel because Trump came down on you rock hard. I mean, he moved the, say what you want about Donald Trump, and I'm critical of just about everything he does and did as president. I really liked what he did with North Korea, but that's an exception. What he did with Iran was horrible. What he did with Russia was horrible, promising one thing, delivering another. And what he did with the Palestinian people in Israel, I mean, he moved the American embassy to Jerusalem. If you don't understand how destabilizing that was and how precipitous that was, you don't know anything about Middle East politics. But he did it. He did it. I mean, he did it, meaning he ain't talk and no action. He said he's going to do something. Damn it, he did it. You got to give him a tip of the hat on that one. Even if you disagree with it, you got to say, okay, if he says he's going to do it, he's going to do it. You didn't dare criticize Israel in the international community when Donald Trump was president of the United States. Biden has tried to sustain that. Look what's happening right now in every nation around the world. The streets are full of people. Garland, in your neck of the woods, when was the last time you thought you'd see, I don't know, how many people?
I was there.
People were there?
I never. They're saying 300,000. It was probably. I've never seen anything like it in my life. The amount of people that was in Washington D.C. and all I saw was genocide. Let's just say, if they think, and they were like 25 years old. So my point is, if they think they had trouble getting young people to join the military last year, I think their problems are going to increase exponentially.
No one's going to fight and die for this system, unfortunately. I mean. I'm not denigrating the people that are serving today, but I will say this, that if you go and you poll their motives, that the majority of their motives are economic in nature, that these are people who, the majority of the new recruits are people who are having difficulty adjusting to the reality of civilian life and chose the military as a structure, a mechanism of, engendering some sort of social and economic stability. A lot of the people that are joining the military today are, man, I'm getting off track here, but I got to say this. When I joined, we had people that could take a punch in the face and not cry about it. We had people that could fail and pick themselves up, dust themselves off, and the drill instructor and whoever didn't have to worry about hurting our feelings. We were there to get tortured. We were there to get beat. We wanted to be beat. We wanted to do this. We wanted to prove ourselves, to be the men that we were, the women that we were. We needed to prove ourselves, and we did. And we emerged from that stronger. Today, they got yellow cards for timeouts. Timeout in basic training. There ain't no such thing as timeout in basic. I got a yellow card. You're hurting my feelings. No, quit. Get out. Go to the dysfunctional platoon. I'll run you through the drill ground forever until you die or you adjust, but you're in the military. This ain't child's play, but it has become child's play. We have a bunch of very soft souls, soft spirits that are in the military today that can't handle the rigors. And I'm not denigrating PTSD. It's real, a lot of suicides, but I'll say that there's a higher rate of PTSD for people who are non-combat because they don't understand the system they got in. And they can't adjust back to the reality. They didn't adjust well before they went into the military. The military, they didn't adjust well there, and they couldn't adjust coming back. And now they got issues. And the reason is because of their psychological profile. And And now you're telling people that you want them to go fight and die for genocide Israel. You want them to go do something in Ukraine where the Banderas are. You want them to take on China. And they're going, no, why do we want to do this? We're not going to join. If you join the military, it's to, uphold and defend the Constitution. But what that really means is you want to defend your country because the Constitution defines your country. There's a lot of people looking at America today, right, going on, this ain't worth defending anymore. This sucks. This is bad. Fix it. Then I'll die for it. Why don't we spend more time trying to fix it and make it something worth dying for than telling me to go off and die for something that is ludicrous? So, yeah, I think you're right. 300,000 people. That's the number I heard. I like that number. It might have even been more. Who knows? Because they always downplay things like this. But you have 300,000. When did you think you're going to see 300,000 people in Washington, D.C.? In Washington, D.C., a city that is bought and paid for by the Israeli lobby. 300,000 people screaming, genocide Israel and all that stuff. Look what's happening in Europe. Israel has lost control of the global narrative. And this is a strategic defeat for Israel, because they always controlled that global narrative. They always could play the anti-Semitism card, the Holocaust card. That's anti-Semitic. And you can still see they're playing it. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the Congress lady from Michigan.
Tlaib.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of hers at all. But I respect her right to hold a very strong opinion about the Palestinians, and I don't think that she said anything wrong. I mean, from the river to the sea can mean a lot of things, not just what the Anti-Defamation League wants it to mean. Why do we allow the Anti-Defamation League? The Anti-Defamation League, which is one of the most prejudiced, racist organizations ever, to tell the U.S. Congress how to define something a U.S. congressperson said. The only people that should hold her to account for anything other than the breaking of the law or unethical behavior are her constituents, who clearly put her in there so she would say such a thing. The most undemocratic thing in the world, even if you disagree with her, as I often do, is to say we're going to use extra democratic processes to curtail, punish, remove this individual. It's the same thing with Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm not a fan, but she was elected by her constituents. Let them solve this problem. If you have a problem with her, put somebody up to run against her. But don't try and solve the problem using mechanisms that are outside of the control of those who put her there. They're responsible. She was elected by them. That's how democracy works. And yet we're letting the Anti-Defamation League define, make definitions of statements, of words, etc. And it's all anti-Semitic. Man, I'm just saying, guys, ladies and gentlemen, there is anti-Semitism out there. It's real. It does exist. I'm not pretending it doesn't exist. But when you have Zionists playing the anti-Semitic card, beware, because they're distracting you. They're trying to say something here so you don't look too closely over here what's really going on.
Yeah, I'm going to share one more. We're going to get out of here, but I'm going to share one more very interesting. Here we go. Is this it? Yes. The ADL issued statement declaring Ukraine's Azov battalion is no longer far right. That's all you need to know right there.
That's all you need to know.
That's all you need
right
to know
there.
right there. The Azov battalion, the guys who are walking around goose stepping Sieg Highland with their latest signed copy of Mein Kampf and Hitler tattoos all over them. There's no problem with them. But if somebody says, hey, I don't think it's okay to kill 10,000 civilians, 5,000 of them being children, well, then you're just an anti-Semitic monster. Maybe if Rashida Tlaib was to join the Azov battalion and go and get a picture of Hitler and Stepan Bandera all over her face, then she'd no longer be anti-Semitic. But as long as she speaks out with her First Amendment, right? Again, like, I'm independent. I hate both parties. I believe in the First Amendment, even stuff I don't like at all. I could hate it. You should be able to stand on the street corner and scream things that I don't like. And if I don't like it, I can go across the street and screen things that you don't like. And anybody who wants to hear what either one of us has to say, cross the street. But that ain't the way it works anymore. And that to me shows, Scott, that they're losing. Everybody go to scottritterextra.com. That's scottritterextra.com. All of Scott's good works are there. And don't forget, when you go to scottritterextra.com, there's ways there that you can support Scott financially. There's ways there that you can donate to the cause. A lot of work Scott has to do. He's got to travel. He's got to go speak in anti-war events and all kinds of good stuff. So please, scottritterextra.com. Everybody go there and make sure you follow Scott and make sure you financially help, fight for the cause and help keep Scott going. You see everything going across the bottom of the screen there. Buymeacoffee.com is certainly an option. Patreon and Cash App, all that stuff is scrolling. So if you can help this channel, I certainly appreciate it. Rockfin, ROKFN, FIN, rockfin.com/Garland. You go there and become a member. If in fact I get tossed off of YouTube, you will be you can still find those, Scott and I there doing our good stuff. All right, thanks a lot, Scott Ritter. Thanks a lot, everyone. Scott and I are out of the house.